Hi everyone, it's Stella Grizont, and I am so excited for today. Thank you so much for joining. We have a bunch of people on the line, over 270 people right now, and that number just keeps on increasing. So it's a real privilege to be here today to talk to you about 3 ways that you can feel more engaged and more happy at work, because we know over 60% of people are feeling unengaged at work. And there's something we can do about it. So today, I hope right after the webinar, you're going to be able to implement these strategies right away. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So here we are, 3 ways to being happier and more engaged at work. So there's some good news and there's some bad news. So the good news is that you have more control over your experience at work than you may think. The bad news is that you have more control than you may think. So it's kind of a double-edged sword because, there's some responsibility and stuff to do. So let me tell you about that. The thing is, I hear this all the time with clients who I coach. It's that, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here again. I'm feeling burnt out, or what's going on with this toxic situation at work, or I'm not getting on the assignments that I want to get, or I'm having difficulty saying no. Whatever it is, the thing is, no matter where you go, there you are. So it doesn't matter if you get a promotion, or you get assigned to a new team, a new project, or even a new job, or even a new career. No matter where you go, there you are. So we have to address the inner stuff first in order to transcend any patterns and to really ultimately feel fulfilled and happy at work. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then we're going to walk through 3 traps that end up sabotaging our happiness at work, and I'm going to talk to you about how to break free, and then I'm going to offer you some resources, and then there will be time for questions. You can also, as we're going along, feel free to use the questions tab in your panel to type in questions so you don't forget, and then I won't answer them right away because I'm not good at multitasking, but I will answer them at the end. Okay. So a little bit about me. So just to give you some background, I've worked in corporate for some of the biggest ad agencies in the world. I've worked as a freelancer. I've worked for startups, and I've run my own business right now. So I've kind of experienced multiple dimensions of work. And over the years, I've coached thousands of corporate and entrepreneurial leaders. I'm regularly asked to speak at organizations like Google, Johnson & Johnson, and Comcast. My unique methodology has been featured across the news, from MSNBC to the Today Show. And I was one of the first 150 people that graduated from UPenn with a master's in applied positive psychology, which is ultimately, the science of happiness. And as Happify members, you know all about that, right? Positive psychology is, traditional psychology is about how do we get people from -5 to 0, and positive psychology is how do we get people from 0 to +5. So that's the area that we're going to play in, especially around work, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But none of this really would have been possible in terms of where I am today, which I would say is my dream job. None of it would have been possible had I not gone through some dark moments where I was really broke, depressed, and confused about my life and my work. I had developed a pretty strong Netflix addiction, especially at a moment where everything felt like it was going wrong. I was getting ready to launch my business. I had invested all my money in launching this business. I had left my previous career of working with entrepreneurs to launch this business. And every moment that I wasn't working, I was collapsed on the couch watching episode after episode of Frasier, 30 Rock, and what else did I watch? Frasier and 30 Rock were the main ones. And those run for many, many seasons, and I watched every single episode at least twice. So there was something going on there that wasn't quite healthy. In fact, I remember sometimes I would get up and I would notice my thighs were red from like the burning sensation of my laptop. So it wasn't a good moment for me. It especially wasn't good because I was feeling really burnt out and confused. And that felt really bad because here I was, a quote unquote like happiness expert who had who was helping people transform their lives and their careers and find fulfillment and happiness at work and create the business of their dreams. And I was basically sabotaging my own success, and I was miserable. And I felt like a total fake. So I was having kind of identity crisis on top of like, super low self-esteem, and I just was feeling really stuck. And so what I did essentially was I hired a coach to help me take my own medicine because it's so hard to do it on your own. And I would say that, even though it's great to have all the information, which I had, I knew what to do. I knew it, but I wasn't embodying it. And that's why, we're human and we need each other and people really matter. And so if you're feeling stuck, I would highly encourage you to work with someone, a mentor, a coach, someone within your organization or outside of your organization, if you're feeling as stuck as I was. So anyway, what we're going to talk about today is how to not get into that place that I was. That's kind of my life mission right now, is to help people really to move through those difficult places with more grace than I did, and to avoid all those pitfalls. And so the traps that I'm going to kind of mention to you today are ones that I was noticing that I was falling into, and they're pretty consistent with all my clients that I coach. So the first trap we're going to talk about is complaining. So I want you to take a moment and just reflect and write down, even if you can, if you have a pen and paper with you, what are 3 things that you've complained about this week? Just take a moment to think about that. It might not take you very long at all. So here's the thing about complaining, and I love this quote. Complaining is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of someone else's mouth, but not necessarily your own, right? 'Cause you're at a meeting, and there goes Bob, and he's complaining about, I can't believe this deadline is being pushed up again, or I can't, what's wrong with them? Why don't they, see that this product is brilliant? Whatever the complaint is, like, we're really sensitive to when other people are complaining, but sometimes we don't realize it when we're doing it. And when I talk about complaining, I'm really referring to complaining as a state. It's a state of grievance or suffering. It's an embodiment of something sucks, and now I'm energetically vibrating on that level. And complaining is a trap. It's different than noticing when something is wrong, right? I could say, oh my God, it's so hot outside. Or maybe it's more appropriate to say, oh my God, it's so cold outside today, right? Because it's wintertime. But, or I could say, wow, it's really cold outside. So I'm making the same observation, but in one instance, I'm embodying it and I'm feeling the suffering, whereas in the other instance, I'm making an observation. So in no way am I ever advocating for not observing, noticing, and saying something about when things are going wrong. I'm just talking about we don't have to fully embody the suffering and let it take over us. So why is complaining a trap? The thing with complaining is that it triggers what's called our negativity bias. Our negativity bias. Our negativity bias is our brain's natural instinct to pay attention to anything that is wrong, bad, or threatening. And the reason why we have this instinct is because over time, we've developed this as a survival mechanism. So just think back to our caveman, cavewoman ancestors who, let's imagine, are in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of the night, and there is some rustling in the bushes. Well, they have a choice. They could be like, it's probably nothing, or, oh my God, let's get out of here, right? They're assuming that unknown is a threat. Their attention goes right there to the noise, and they run. So over time, those that ended up fleeing from danger or standing up to it or recognizing it, paying attention to it, those were the ones that survived. And we, over time, have inherited that adaptive mindset. And so this is why bad news gets our attention like that, right? This is why you may have done an excellent job on a presentation and 15 people in the room are being like, that was awesome, that was killer, it's going to change the way I do X, Y, and Z. And then one person gives you a negative piece of feedback, and that's all you can think about. It's our negativity bias. So when we're complaining, that is a symptom that our negativity bias is being inflamed. The problem with our negativity bias and why it can hold us back from fully engaging at work and from fully being happy is because it gives us tunnel vision, literally and figuratively. So it blocks out all the goodness that's happening around you and all the opportunity around you. So there was a really cool study that was done using an eye tracking device. And what they did is they took two groups, they put on the eye tracking device, and one group was induced into a positive mood. They showed them pictures of babies and puppies and comedy, and then they showed the other group kind of depressing images, and they had people in two different moods. And what do you think they noticed? Well, when they asked the participants to look at a screen and they could track where their eyes were moving, what they found is that those in a negative mood, their eyes tended to focus on one particular area in the image and not really move too far around the image. They were just kind of glued into one particular zone. Whereas those in a positive mood, their eyes tended to kind of go around the periphery of the image and then they scattered within. So literally, your vision is impacted by your mood. And when you're complaining, you're activating that kind of negativity bias, which is just focused on danger and what's wrong. And it's just focused on that, and it's glued to that. And so you're missing the bigger picture, opportunities right under your nose, or all the goodness that's happening for you. And that really kind of eats away at your general sense of life satisfaction and work satisfaction, right? So how do we break free from this trap? This is something that I love to assign my clients, which is a complaint vacation. All expenses paid, complaint vacation. And what you do is you just notice your thoughts for the next week. You can do this. Like I said, I'm promising you tools you can use right away as soon as you end this workshop. I want you to notice your thoughts for the next week. And as soon as you find the complaint bubbling up, you may not notice it in advance. Maybe you're noticing it as it's coming out of your mouth or whatever. Just notice it as soon as you can and try to neutralize it or avoid it altogether. And then what I want you to do is to notice and write down 5 things you're grateful for each day. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. Doug, who's a client of mine, he's a senior engineer, talked about how this really shifted things around for him. He was ready to switch careers, and in just 1 week of doing this, he was like, "Wow!" He's like, "I completely was missing the big picture." He didn't realize how grateful he was for his colleagues who he had mutual respect for. He was forgetting about all the luxuries and conveniences of his work. He's like, you know what? I never stopped to appreciate how I have a parking spot, which means that I have the luxury of coming in whenever I want. so I don't have to rush to work. I know I have a parking spot. Like, you start to notice the small things and you start to notice the big things. So here's your first homework assignment is for the next week, I want you to take a complaint vacation and see what that does for you. Even if things are going really well, remember, it's about taking things from 0 to +5. So even if things are going really well, this is going to help them get even better. So let's take a moment now and let's just get the party started now. And I want you to take a moment and write down 5 things you're grateful for about your job right now. And if you're struggling, like, it can be as simple as the coffee's really good, or at least there's coffee in the morning, or Sally's amazing, she always puts a smile on my face. Like, I'm sure you can come up with 5 things. Give it a shot right now. I'll give you a moment. Okay. So the thing I want to emphasize is, when we're coming up with gratitude and we're not complaining, this isn't about playing pretend. It's not about avoiding things that need to be fixed or changed or modified, or problems that need to be solved. It's critical that we pay attention to those things, right? We don't want to be so optimistic at a level 10 that we think everything's wonderful and it's going to be fine, so I don't have to change anything about myself. Or, oh, that pain that I've been feeling for like 3 months, oh, I'm sure that will go away. I don't need to go to the doctor, right? It's not about the super uber optimistic mindset that's not realistic. It's just about not letting yourself become the emotion. It's about noticing, taking action. And here's the thing when it comes to complaining. Usually you're complaining, or most people complain, to someone who has nothing to do with the solution, right? So what would happen if we stopped complaining and just went to the source and talked about, hey, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm noticing. So that's our first kind of way to feel more happy and engaged at work. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is a really big trap, and that's criticism, self-criticism. So criticism, how I'm defining it here, is a form of disapproval for a perceived fault, right? So it's basically like you're super judging yourself. And not all self-criticism is bad, right? It's not all bad, but it gets bad when it leads to a condition called learned helplessness. So learned helplessness is a term that was coined by Martin Seligman, who is one of the founders of positive psychology. He's considered like the godfather of positive psychology. And but ironically, before he became famous for positive psychology, he actually became famous for his work on depression. And he did a lot of experimentation, and he stumbled upon this condition that he was noticing with dogs. And I'm not going to go into the actual study and how he found it, but basically, you can think about it like this. When they're training elephants for the circus, right? They can take baby elephants and tie them with just a little rope to a stake in the ground. And the elephant notices that every time it tries to move, it can't go anywhere. So no matter what it tries, nothing seems to help. So what happens when the elephant grows up, gets huge and really strong? They don't even need to use a rope anymore. That elephant just doesn't move, just stays close to that stake in the ground. It doesn't realize that if it wanted to, it could just walk or run free. So learned helplessness is the learning of a belief that no matter what you do, it's not going to change. And what fortifies learned helplessness? It's how we talk to ourselves. It's how we talk to ourselves. It's the inner critic that beats us down until we feel like there's no way out. So the thing is, learned helplessness can pop up in our lives in a number of domains. It's not necessarily present everywhere, but I'm sure there's been a moment in your life or in your work experience where you found that maybe you're the one holding yourself back. And so how do we get out of this trap of learned helplessness? Well, Seligman talks about the way for us to break free is the way that we talk to each other. So the way we get into it oftentimes is the way that we talk to ourselves, our explanatory style of when things go wrong. And so we can also talk ourselves out of learned helplessness by just changing the dialogue we have with ourselves. So the way to remember this explanatory style that will shift from your feeling like there's no way this is going to change to I can do something about this and this can shift is to remember the 3 Ps. And so they go like this. And by the way, this is called learned optimism. So if something goes wrong, so let's say you're giving a presentation and it wasn't well received. The way you want, the 3 Ps are, first of all, to not take it personally, to not see it as a permanent setback, and to not see it as a pervasive event. So to not take it personally means, it's not like I'm totally messed up. It's not all my fault, right? I'm going to take responsibility, but it's not because I'm a horrible human being, right? To not see it as permanent means, yeah, this was just one setback, but it doesn't mean it's going to be like this forever, right? And to not see it as pervasive means, yeah, in this one particular instance, at work, I didn't maybe present as well as I could, but it doesn't mean I don't kick ass in sales or I'm not a great leader and coach, right? So you're not seeing it pervade in every domain. So the way you want to talk to yourself, let's just do a little exercise. You're going to do this right now, is, or here's an example, and then you're going to practice. So I want you to write down one criticism that you have of yourself. So here's an example. I'm a failure, okay? So then I want you to provide 3 pieces of evidence using the 3 Ps that prove your accusation is wrong. And so when I do this exercise, I like to imagine that I'm like a defense attorney, and I'm thinking, I'm like the best defense attorney there is, and I'm going to use the 3 Ps to make an amazing case. So if, say the belief is I'm a failure, no matter what I do, I just kind of I can't seem to move forward. Well, the first thing I would say is well, I'm not a complete failure, right? It's not pervasive everywhere. I'm a great parent. I kick butt in softball. I do a lot of things really well. And maybe my sales are down because of the economy, which, it's not all my fault. Yeah, I haven't done really well in sales, and there's things I know I can learn and improve, but the economy sucks, and that's just going to affect my sales. But before I've had dips, and I've overcome them, and I know I can overcome this again, so it's not permanent. I know it's going to shift. So I want you to take a moment and just identify an inner criticism that you may have of yourself, and practice these 3 Ps. So I'm going to just put on my timer, and I'm going to give you a moment to do that. And if you have questions about this, put it in the questions box. I will definitely come back to this and answer your question. Okay. And you guys can continue this exercise later again too. It might not be one of those quickies. I totally understand that, but I wanted to give you a sense to even just to start to identify where you might be holding yourself back. What's that running belief that you feel is no matter what, this isn't really going to change. It could also be a belief about no, about a boss. Like, for example, one of my clients, um, she was feeling like no matter what she did, she's like, her boss was holding her back. He didn't have a strategic vision of what was happening for the team, and she was just crying at her desk every day. Like, she had been super happy at work, was a director, making great money, loved her work until she switched onto this team. And she just thought, there's no way that this guy is going to understand what I have to say. He just doesn't even have the capacity for it. I mean, it took us 3 months, but but she finally was able to recognize that, you know what, maybe there is a way out of this. And she had a conversation with him. Within 24 hours, she was able to change the assignment that she was working on. She felt so much better. She's like, Stella, I'm not crying at work anymore. And I was like, oh my God, yes. But that's because she thought, no matter what, he's not going to get it. And so we scripted a conversation for her. She recognized that this didn't have to be permanent, that she wasn't a failure. She was starting to question her own identity, and she was starting to question her own skills because this just was taking over. But what she recognized in this moment was that, wow, she has more control than she thinks, right? Coming back to the beginning of the webinar, like the good news and the bad news, you have more control than you think. And so she exercised that agency, and she got herself onto a new assignment, created new agreements with this boss, and like, it's awesome. It's really awesome. So, so really, what if you have more control than you think? And here's the thing. I love this analogy. You're the director of your own experience. So let's imagine you're in a park, and there's 3 different directors with a camera. They could look at the same scenario with their camera, 3 different ones, and they could each create a different movie. You could see a couple, and one camera is pointing to that couple, and it's creating a movie about romance, right? Then another camera could be pointing at that same couple and creating, a movie about a cheating couple and how they're miserable in their love lives, right? And then you could have another camera that points to a man and a woman and their brother and sister, and they just escaped from a country, and they're just reveling in their sense of freedom. Like, the thing is, you decide where you point the camera and what story you tell yourself. So ask yourself, how else might I see this experience? And that may really give you the opening, the space to kind of see it differently. So the third trap that I want to talk about is comparing yourself to others. This can straight up make us miserable and just really taint all the good stuff that we have going on at work. So the definition of this is using others to evaluate where you stand, right? It's called social comparison in psychology terms. It's where, we evaluate our own success by looking at others. And especially now with Facebook and social media, it's so easy to feel like crap about ourselves, even if we're doing really well, because there's always someone who's showcasing their like amazing bags or their amazing vacation or how they're, doing so well at work or whatever it is. And it's a trap because, I love this quote, the reason we struggle with insecurity is because we're constantly comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. So we don't get to see everyone's behind the scenes. We just see their highlight reel, but we're comparing it with our sense of struggle or insecurity. And that is just, when it comes to social comparison, what psychologists have found is that it usually results in higher sense of insecurity, low self-esteem. It's a detriment to your overall happiness and well-being. The only instance when social comparison actually works for you is when you can see people who are worse off than you, and that makes you feel better. So as a framework for evaluating where you are, if you have to depend on other people doing worse to feel good about you and to get a few points in your self-esteem bank, that kind of sucks. So, so how do we work around this trap? Because it's so easy to look over and be like, look at Peggy. She's always got it going on. She always looks so good and perky in the morning, and she's like killing it in the meetings, and like, what am I doing? And I can't get my stuff together. And it is just a trap. So we got to stop it. So how do we break free? Well, the first thing you have to understand is that you never have enough information about the other person. Never. You have no idea what's going on in their lives. You don't know how hard they worked, how they're staying up at night, how they're also super insecure. You have no idea, right? Because it's your behind the scenes and their highlight reel. And so if you are using this as an evaluation technique, it is not just based on data points, a valid technique to evaluate where you stand, because you don't have all the data points. I'm going to give you a perfect example. So this is me, and my husband's the one in the cowboy hat. It's our daughter when she was like 4 months old, and those are our friends, and that's a Vanagon, which I didn't even know the term for this, Volkswagen camper van. But my husband always had a dream of us being a very outdoorsy family. And I'm not naturally outdoorsy. I really love it, but it's been a process for me. So when our daughter was small, he kind of was like, what if we all hop in a van and take a road trip, a California road trip. This is when we were living in California, and we go out camping. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And I kid you not, I'm not claustrophobic, but the first night when we were sleeping in this camper van, which you can see like the hood is popped because you can actually like sleep on the top. There's like a way to sleep on the top. I was crying with I started to feel claustrophobic, and I've never had that sensation. And our daughter was in her portable crib right below us, and I was like, oh my God, we're gonna crush her, we're gonna fall on top of her. And I was just so cold. It was like 50 degrees at night, and I was worried she was gonna be freezing to death, and I was just so stressed, crying. And then I'm having to pump breast milk while we're on the move, and it just felt so hard. It felt like one of the most difficult moments I've ever had. And I just told my husband, I'm sorry, I don't want to do that again until I don't want us to go camping again with her until she's older, and I don't have to breastfeed and pump in the back of this van while we're driving down curvy, windy roads. It's not a good idea. And so we get back home, we see our neighbors, and our neighbors are packing up their car, and we're like, hey, where are you going? They're like, oh, we're just taking our 2 kids, one a toddler and one even younger than Lenore. We're going on a road trip to Monterey. And I was like, oh no. And we got upstairs, and my husband was looking at me like there was something wrong with me, and he's like, see, look, they're hopping in their car, no problem. They have 2 kids. And here I am complaining that I don't ever want to do this again for a long time. So we ended up getting into a pretty big fight. Fast forward, a few weeks later, we're having brunch with our neighbors, and I was like, how was your trip to Monterey? How was camping? And they're like, oh, we weren't camping. We actually had a hotel room, and then we just went to the aquarium and things like that. And I just looked at my husband, and I felt so validated. And we had gotten over our fight and everything, but the point is, he got so upset because he thought there was we weren't outdoorsy enough, or I wasn't outdoorsy enough, and I was limited in all these ways. And the fact that I didn't enjoy our trip, there was something wrong with us. But and then we found out our neighbors, didn't camp. And so you never have all the information, but it's so easy to jump to conclusions and feel like you're not enough is the whole point. Sorry, this was a long-winded story. So if you're looking over at someone at work, or you're looking on Facebook and you're feeling like you're not enough, that can really zap your joy. So how do you get around this? Oh, that's, by the way, me pumping, making sandwiches, and like watching our daughter while we're inside this van again. It was crazy. I mean, it turned out to be actually an awesome trip at the end, but I just said, I don't want to do this again while I have to pump. Anyway, more beautiful shots. Anyway, so how do we break free from this trap? So the very first thing you have to do when it comes to not letting comparison invade kind of your overall happiness is to remember that it's so important for you to have a vision, an inspired vision for how you want to be and for what success means to you. If you're clear on what that vision is, then you don't have to look outside of yourself to know if you're on track, to evaluate how you're doing, because you have your own vision. You have a unique way of flourishing in this world. There are certain things that need to be going on for you to feel most alive at work and in life. And you need to identify what those are. And the way to do that is to let yourself create a vision. And this is one of the first things I do with my clients. And the things that you want to think about are, I call them the 5 Ps. Your passion. What is it that really, topics, or what is it that I'm doing, or how's it that I'm being when I'm feeling activated and energized and like I could just do this forever? The second P is people. How is it that I'm interacting with others? How is it that I'm interacting with leadership? What's the nature of our relationship? Who is it that really I'm most activated around? The third P is purpose. So how am I, what is it that enables me to feel like I'm contributing to something bigger than myself? The fourth P is process. So what are the conditions that enable me to feel most alive? So is it that I'm creative? Is it that I have a sense of autonomy? Is it that I have a short commute to work? Is it that I have flexibility? What is it about the process in which you do your work and how you do your work? And finally, prosperity. That's really important. How am I being compensated, and how does that enable me to live the life that I want? So when you think about your vision, it's so easy for us just to think about what we don't want and to create a vision that's the opposite of, of our pain, right? So it's really easy for us to think about what's wrong because of our negativity bias. But you don't want to just be escaping the bad. You want to be moving towards the good. So you need to step out of just identifying what's wrong and then kind of listing the opposite of that. But you really want to think about, what is it that brings me most alive? Now, to do a vision, this is I want to share this with all of you. This is an exercise I do with my clients when they start to work with me. And I want to share this with you. But I've created what I call the vision generator, which will help you develop a robust vision that considers all the elements. And it's free. You can download it like instantaneously. And if you don't feel like you know exactly what's next, or you're maybe feeling a little stuck, or you just, maybe things are going pretty well, but you're not sure about what's next, or you're not really sure, like, am I really living in as big as I possibly can be? What is it that is my version of success? Like, this will help you answer your unique vision of what it means to live your most alive life. You need to have this so that next time you feel that icky trigger of feeling less than because you're comparing yourself to someone else, you're going to have this for you. And you're going to just be like, wait, you know what? It's really important that I get to exercise my creativity, and I have full autonomy at work. I'm kicking ass, and I have time to spend with my family, and I'm loving my life. So I'm not gonna go there. So if you do this vision, and by the way, it takes like no more than 30 minutes, this can save you from so much angst, and it's just uber critical. It's just uber critical that you get clear on how you want to be so that you don't fall into the trap of just comparing yourself until there's nothing left, until you just feel like, what good am I anyway? So do check it out, workhappinessmethod.com/vision. The second thing that's important for you to do is to clarify your values. And when I work with my clients, I kind of help them use their vision as kind of a jumping off point. But your values are the guiding principles for how you behave and for the decisions that you make. And they're the guiding principles that guide you to living your vision. So if you're feeling a sense of conflict, or you're feeling like comparing yourself to someone else may be getting to you a little bit, it may be because, you're not actually living in alignment with your own values. You're living in alignment with someone else's, which, we all have a definition of success in our minds that we grow up thinking is, if you're going to make it, this is what it looks like. But it actually may not be your definition of success. So your values are kind of, after you have your big vision, they're your guideposts, like they keep you in the right lane. And then the third way to break free from this trap is just to know your own strengths and to use them in fresh and new ways. In fact, research shows that when you use your strengths in new and fresh ways, you can actually reduce the symptoms of depression. I'm not saying you guys are depressed, but I'm just saying, like, it's so powerful that it can actually do that. And it's just really reinvigorating. And if you don't know what your strengths are, there's several ways that you can do some assessments. You can go to strengthsfinders.com. You can just buy the book for $10 and you'll have access to that assessment. You can also try the Values in Action assessment, which measures your character strengths and how do you go on to that? If you just Google Values in Action assessment, you can find it, and it's free to do that one. So just to recap, we're coming towards the end. Just to recap, the 3 traps that can sabotage your sense of engagement and happiness at work. The first trap that we talked about is complaining. And what you're going to do this next week is you're just going to neutralize and focus on the good stuff and write down 5 things you're grateful for and take a complaint vacation. The second thing that we talked about is inner criticism. And you have a technique that you can use right away for talking to yourself in a different way when you hit a setback. You're not going to take it personally, you're not going to see it as permanent, and you're not going to see it as pervasive. And finally, the third trap we talk about is comparing yourself to others. And the way to get around that is to have a vision of success that inspires you, that brings you alive. That is first and foremost. And you can access the vision generator at workhappinessmethod.com/vision. And then you want to get clear on what your values are and what your strengths are so that you can make decisions in alignment with them. So with that, that's the end. But we're going to take some questions, and I wanted to let you guys know that if you haven't taken it and you are on Happify, you can take my track that's called Get Unstuck, which if you're feeling a little stuck, it's a really fun, playful way to kind of just get reinvigorated, use your imagination, and get inspired. So let me go to the questions. Ryan says, my wife tells me, and rightfully so, and I agree with her, that I'm never happy with what I have. How do you break free from the grass is always greener syndrome? Awesome, great question, Ryan. So this again is because you're looking at other people or other situations and you're not paying attention to your own vision. And you're making an evaluation not based on your own vision. So your vision has to be how you measure yourself. And that's why I work through values, because they guide you in okay, these are my values. Am I living my values today? How did I live these values today? And if you lived your values today, that is the key that sets you free. Because if you're living your life according to your values, then every day is a good day. But you have to know what those are. And it sounds simple, but it's not necessarily easy. Because when do we really sit down and go through that kind of hard work, and it's hard to do it on your own. So the key is to really have that inspired vision and know your values, because those are the keys to what will guide you in living the life that's worth living, making the decisions for you living the life that's worth living. So if you can go to bed and kind of go through that and say, okay, how did I live my value of, being creative and living on the edge today? Or how did I express love and tenderness to someone today? Or, I don't know what your values are, but when you do that, that is the key. Let's see. Hossein, Stella, your presentation impressed me. You touched exactly my problems. You're right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. All right. And I have a few more questions that I can answer that were emailed to me in advance by some folks, and they were so good. So I'm going to go ahead and answer those while I still have you guys. They were awesome. So Myra Andrade, I hope I said your name right, asked, do you have any strategies for overcoming the fear of making a career change? Yes, this is what I love to do with people is guide them through that. So I don't want to sound like a broken record, but you got to first create that vision for yourself. And then you have to know what your values are, because that's what's going to give you the confidence that you're making the right decision. That's what's going to give you the confidence, because you've done that inner work. Because remember, no matter where you go, there you are. So if you do that inner work, you're going to know that, because the fear of making a career change is like, oh my God, am I going to take this huge risk and end up feeling like crap again in this new career change? Is it going to be just like a different situation, but more of the same? And so the way to get around that is to do the inner work, do the vision, do the values work, understand yourself and what it is that you really, really want and need to feel most alive. And then start practicing that now in your current job, because you have more control than you think. And you can start living that way now. And what you're going to start to notice is some amazing shifts, some pretty amazing shifts, because right now you may have tunnel vision around this situation sucks and I got to get out, which is true. And you can do things to start feeling better now while you start to think about the change. And I have a program called the Dream Job Accelerator where I guide people in making that change. But the way that you take the fear out is you do a huge discovery phase. After you know what your values are, you engage in a huge discovery phase, which is all about information gathering, because you need to have all the data points. It's not just about a career switch, it's maybe about certain conditions in the process in which you work that you need to be different too. So you need to engage in a lot of informational interviews to really feel confident about that move and how you're going to do that move. So please reach out to me and I'm happy to talk to you more about that. And I'll take just one final question. What specific advice do you have for remote home office employees in terms of applying what is covered in class? I know so many of us work remotely. So here's the thing with working remotely. I work virtually. I have clients in Australia, London, California, Idaho. So I really work from home, and I'm basically a remote worker as well. And it can be really lonely, and it can be so hard to stay productive and motivated when you're all alone. Because, and I can get into this science, but basically we need other people. And there's something about having other breathing bodies in the room that just makes you feel better. So, you can still apply all the tips that I said, noticing what you're grateful for, taking a complete vacation, talking to yourself in a different explanatory style, knowing what your vision is. And if you're feeling like you're feeling disconnected from those you work with, consider how you might, in the least, do more video calls to see people face to face. Organize more moments where you can work together, off sites where you can all get together. And this is what I do. I actually, even though I have a huge home office, I actually work at a co-working space just a few days out of the week, because I want to just see other people and have living bodies around me. So I personally find that it's so important for me to just be around people. And even though I love doing all this webinar work because it enables me to reach thousands at a time, I actually will book events to speak in person. I love it when organizations bring me to speak in person because I get so much out of that exchange of being in person. So so if you're feeling a little isolated, it's just because that's your biology. It's all of our biologies. We're not meant to be alone in that way. And so you can do something about it. So just try any of those strategies, and I hope they help in addition to the tips that I mentioned. So on that note, I am so grateful for you today. And just remember, when you find your piece in the puzzle, you enable 10,000 others to find theirs. So when you're lit up, you light up others. And so your doing this work is just a service to all of us. So thank you so much and have an awesome weekend.